A gravitational surge saved an entire council chamber, even though it should have crushed a city. And the impossible part: the stabilizing force wasn't a superweapon. It was a human who refused to step back. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from and subscribe to help the channel grow. Now let's begin. The gravitational sensors screamed before Jonas Hale even stepped through the airlock. Not the steady hum of normal operation, not even the warning beep of equipment strain. This was a full-throated wail that made his teeth ache and his inner ear protest the very concept of up and down. Dock 77 sprawled before him like a mechanical cathedral built by something that hated straight lines. Massive stabilizer columns twisted at angles that shouldn't work, held in place by gravitational fields strong enough to fold metal. Steam vented from 1,000 pressure points, and the air tasted like ozone and old fear. Jonas adjusted his tool bag and tried not to think about how his repair shop back on Station Kepler was 3 months behind on lease payments. Supervisor Kelm materialized from behind a support beam, pale green skin glistening with nervous sweat. The Velen's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, never quite focusing on Jonas for more than a heartbeat. "You read the contract?" Kelm's voice cracked halfway through. "All of it?" "Sure did." Jonas had read the liability waiver 6 times. It was longer than the actual job description. Gravitational stabilizer maintenance. Standard pay plus hazard bonus. I fix things, you pay me, everyone goes home happy. Happy. Kelm made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a whimper. "Right, let me be extraordinarily clear about something, Human Hale. See that section?" He pointed to a cordoned area where the metal floor warped like frozen waves. Warning lights pulsed in a rhythm that felt deliberately ominous. "That's the restricted zone. The Corinth works there. You don't go near it. You don't look at it. You don't speak to it. And for the love of every star in the void, you don't sit near it during breaks." "It?" Jonas raised an eyebrow. "You mean her, right? Vishara Lincor? Your files say she's a person, not a it, she, whatever keeps you alive." Kelm's translator stuttered over the pronouns. 23 industrial accidents in 2 years. Not because she's malicious, because she feels too much. Emotions destabilize her gravitational field. Last month someone dropped a tool near her during a bad day. The tool weighed half a kilo. It left a crater you could hide a transport in. Jonas whistled low. "And she still works here? Where else would she go?" Kelm's eyes finally met his, and Jonas saw something unexpected. Not just fear, pity. "No one else will take her. No insurance company will cover her. She's too dangerous to be around people, too useful to let go. So she sits there, alone, and waits for someone brave enough or stupid enough to deliver her assignments in person. Which am I?" "We'll find out." Kelm thrust a datapad at him. "Your equipment manifest. Stabilizers 1 through 40 need calibration. Start at the far end. Work your way toward the restricted zone, and for the void's sake, don't make eye contact if you see her." Jonas took the pad and glanced at the restricted zone again. He couldn't see much through the distortion fields, just a vague silhouette sitting motionless on what might have been a bench. Just sitting there, alone. "Has she ever actually hurt anyone?" Jonas asked quietly. Kelm's answer came faster than thought, like he'd rehearsed it 1,000 times. "She doesn't have to. She just has to feel." The supervisor walked away before Jonas could ask anything else, leaving him alone with 40 malfunctioning stabilizers and a question that wouldn't stop echoing in his head. If she's so dangerous, why does she look so sad? Jonas shrugged, picked up his first toolkit, and got to work. He'd survived collapsing mine shafts and cargo bay decompression. He'd watched a black hole eat a moon from 600 kilometers away. Danger was just another word for Tuesday. But as he calibrated the first stabilizer, he couldn't shake the image of that solitary figure sitting perfectly still in a space everyone else fled from. Not moving, not threatening, just alone. And something about that bothered him more than all the warning sirens in the galaxy. 3 days into the job, Jonas learned that Dock 77 ran on fear like other places ran on electricity. Workers moved in careful patterns, never straying too close to certain areas. Conversations dropped to whispers when gravitational readings spiked. Even the automated systems seemed nervous, their alert protocols triggering at the slightest anomaly. And everyone, without exception, gave the restricted zone a berth of at least 10 meters. Jonas noticed Engineer Hask watching him during the morning briefing. The Corvan was tall, angular, and carried himself with the confidence of someone who'd never been wrong about anything in his life. "Taking bets on the human," Hask announced to the break room at large. His translator gave his words a sneering edge. "I give him a week before he requests transfer, 2 weeks if he's stubborn." "What happens after 2 weeks?" someone asked. Hask's smile showed too many teeth. "After 2 weeks, he'll understand why stubbornness and survival aren't the same thing." Jonas ignored them, collected his lunch rations, and headed for the canteen. The room was larger than it needed to be, with tables scattered like someone had been afraid to put them too close together. Most workers clustered near the entrance, as far from the restricted zone as the space allowed. At the far end, past the distortion fields and warning lights, a single figure sat at a table. She wasn't eating. The meal tray in front of her hadn't been touched. Her hands rested in her lap, and her gaze stayed fixed on the table surface, like she was afraid looking up might shatter something. Vishara Lin Kaur, the most dangerous woman on Razun Prime, the living weapon, the gravitational nightmare, sitting alone, looking small in a way that had nothing to do with physical size. Jonas made a decision that would have horrified Supervisor Kelm. He walked toward her table. The canteen went silent. Gravitational sensors began their anxious whine. Someone dropped a utensil, and it clattered like thunder in the sudden quiet. Jonas reached her table, set down his tray, and sat down. Not a meter away. Not even half a meter. Right beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. The sensors screamed. Overhead lights flickered. The metal walls creased inward by a centimeter, then stopped. Vishara's head snapped up. Her eyes were violet, wide with shock, and something in them reminded Jonas of a startled animal that had forgotten it was allowed to run. "Hey," Jonas said, as casually as he'd greet any coworker. "This seat taken?" She stared at him. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again, and then, impossibly, color flooded her cheeks. She was blushing. The walls bowed slightly inward again, but differently this time. Not destructive, more like the building itself was embarrassed and didn't know what to do about it. Jonas smiled, genuinely confused. "Sorry, did I startle you? I can move if you want privacy." "No." Her voice was barely audible, rougher than he expected, like she didn't use it often. "No one ever... You're not supposed to." She didn't finish. Her hands twisted together in her lap, and Jonas noticed they were trembling. Not supposed to what? Sit down? He unwrapped his meal, deliberately casual. Seemed like a waste of a whole table. "I'm dangerous." The words came out mechanical, rehearsed. "Emotionally unstable. Class 7 gravitational hazard. You should maintain minimum safe distance of..." "You haven't hurt me yet." Jonas took a bite of something that was either bread or an optimistic geological formation. "And I've survived worse lunch company. There was this one Greenwich trader who ate live insects. Very crunchy, very loud." A sound escaped her, not quite a laugh. More like laughter's distant cousin who wasn't sure it was invited to the conversation. "You're insane," she whispered. "Probably," Jonas shrugged. "But I'm also hungry, and this is the only empty table. Unless you've got a problem with humans." "I don't have problems with anyone," her voice cracked. "They have problems with me." The sensors had stopped screaming, the walls had stopped bending. In fact, if Jonas had to describe the feeling in the air, he'd call it stable. More stable than anything else he'd felt in Dock 77 so far. "Well, I don't have a problem with you," he said simply. "You mind if I eat here tomorrow, too?" She looked at him like he'd offered her something impossibly valuable and dangerous at the same time. Yes. I mean, no. I mean... She closed her eyes, took a breath. You can sit here. Cool. Jonas returned to his meal, missing entirely how the entire canteen was frozen in stunned silence. Missing how Vishara's hands had stopped shaking. Missing how, for the first time in 3 years, someone had chosen to sit beside her instead of away from her. But he didn't miss her whispered words, so quiet they were almost lost under the hum of machinery. Thank you. From across the canteen, Hask stared at his datapad in disbelief. The gravitational readings had just hit their lowest levels in recorded history because a human had sat down for lunch. Jonas made it a habit. Every lunch break, he sat at Vishara's table. Every morning, he'd wave at her across the work floor. Every time he passed the restricted zone, he'd call out something mundane about the weather stations or complain about a stubborn bolt. And slowly, impossibly, she started responding. At first it was just nods, then single words. By the end of the second week, she was asking questions about his work, listening with an intensity that suggested every word was being catalogued and treasured. The doc noticed, "The human's suicidal," workers muttered during shift changes. "Give it time. One bad day, and he'll learn." But the bad days never came. Or rather, they came and went, and Jonas kept sitting beside her, kept talking like she was just another person trying to make it through the day. Supervisor Kelm pulled him aside after a particularly quiet lunch. "I don't know what you're doing, but keep doing it. Her stability readings are better than they've been in years. Command is noticing." That last part worried Jonas, but he didn't have time to dwell on it. His shop's lease payment was coming due, and the hazard bonus was the only thing keeping him from bankruptcy. He needed this job, needed the money. But somewhere along the way, it had stopped being just about the money. He'd started looking forward to lunch, to the way Vishara's eyes lit up when he described fixing an engine, to the small smile she'd learned to show when he made terrible jokes. On day 17, he was calibrating stabilizer 32 when something caught his eye. A maintenance panel hung open near the restricted zone, and inside, a datapad glowed with active logs. He shouldn't have looked, it was clearly classified. But one of the file names stopped him cold. Project Graviton, Subject 1. His hands moved before his brain could stop them. 3 quick taps, and the file opened. Weapon development, forced conditioning, planetary bombardment. A child subjected to gravitational torture until she could collapse buildings with a thought. Vishara hadn't chosen this power. She'd been made into it. Shaped into a weapon so terrifying that even after the war ended, no one knew how to let her be anything else. Jonas closed the file with shaking hands. He looked across the floor to where she sat, perfectly still, waiting for instructions no one wanted to deliver in person. She wasn't unstable because she was defective. She was unstable because she'd been taught that emotions were failures, that feeling anything made her dangerous, and everyone around her had spent years confirming that belief. The anger that rose in Jonas was quiet but absolute. He thought about his own childhood, scraping by in mining colonies, but at least he'd been allowed to be human, to feel, to exist as more than a tool. He found Vishara at lunch, sat down with perhaps more force than usual. "Tell me about the Carinth," he said. "Your people. What were they like before the war?" She blinked, startled by the directness. I don't remember. I was young when they took me for training." "What do you remember?" A long pause. "Music. I think we had music. Something that resonated with gravitational frequencies. I hear it sometimes in my dreams, but I don't know if it's real or something I imagined." Jonas made a note on his personal pad. "I'll look into it. Maybe I can find recordings." "Why?" The question was soft, confused. "Why do you care?" "Because you're not a weapon." Jonas met her eyes steadily. "You're a person, and persons deserve to remember where they came from." Her expression did something complicated. The walls didn't bend, the sensors didn't scream. Instead, she smiled, small and genuine and heartbreaking in its rarity. No one's ever said that to me before. Across the dock in a secure observation room, Director Rivox reviewed the stability data with growing unease. Dr. Vin, the facility's chief scientist, stood beside him, equally troubled, but for different reasons. "This is unprecedented," Vin said, highlighting the graphs. "Her gravitational field hasn't been this stable since initial containment. The human is somehow counteracting years of conditioning." Rivox's expression darkened. "If a maintenance worker can stabilize her, we can't justify the military oversight budget, or the specialized containment protocols, or the research grants. With respect, Director, maybe that's not a bad thing. If she can be stabilized naturally, perhaps we can reintegrate her into—" "She's worth billions in defense contracts," Rivox cut him off. "As a managed threat, as a person, she's worthless." Vin stared at his superior with dawning horror. "You can't be serious." "Watch me." Rivox turned away from the monitors. "Schedule a stress evaluation for Subject 1, full protocol. I want to see if this stability is real or just a temporary anomaly. That evaluation was designed to break her. If we run it now, then we'll know if the human's influence is genuine." Rivox's smile was cold. "Or if she's still the weapon we've been paying to contain." Vin watched the director leave, then looked back at the monitors. At the human and the Carinth, sitting together, talking about music from a life she couldn't remember. He pulled up the evaluation protocols, read through the procedures, felt his stomach turn, and then he made a choice that would complicate everything. He sent Jonas Hale an anonymous message. "They're going to test her, and they're going to use you to do it." In the canteen, Jonas's pad chimed. He glanced at the message, frowned, then looked at Vishara, who was describing the color of Carinth skies with hesitant wonder. Something cold settled in his chest. He had a feeling this job was about to become a lot more complicated than fixing stabilizers. Dr. Vin found Jonas in Toolbay 6, elbow deep in a stabilizer's guts and muttering about whoever had designed gravitational field generators without basic maintenance access. "You received my message." It wasn't a question. Jonas didn't look up. "You got a name to go with that ominous warning?" "Dr. Mikhail Vin, Chief Scientific Officer. And before you ask, yes, I'm taking a significant risk talking to you." "So why are you?" "Because I became a scientist to help people, and what they're planning isn't science." Vin pulled up a chair, sat without invitation. "The evaluation protocol is designed to destabilize Subject 1 emotionally. They'll manufacture scenarios to trigger distress responses, measure the gravitational damage, then use the data to justify continued containment." Jonas's hands stopped moving. "They're going to hurt her on purpose." "Yes, and they're going to use you as the catalyst, threaten you, harm you, make her believe you're in danger. Her protective response will be catastrophic." "When?" 3 days, maybe 4. Rivox is waiting for approval from oversight, but it's a formality." Vin leaned forward. "I can't stop it, but I can delay it, give you time to—" "I don't know. Prepare? Warn her?" Jonas finally looked at him. "You could lose your position, your research access. I could lose my ability to sleep at night if I do nothing." Vin smiled tightly. "Call it a crisis of conscience." A voice from the doorway made them both turn. "Call it 2 crises." Engineer Asha stepped in, her scales glinting copper under the work lights. She'd been on Jonas's repair crew for a week, quiet but competent, and he'd caught her watching him and Vishara during lunch more than once. "You're not exactly subtle," Asha said, directing it at Vin. "Half the facility knows something's wrong, but most of them are too scared or too invested to care." She turned to Jonas. "I'm neither. Count me in." Jonas looked between them. "In for what, exactly?" "Whatever you're planning." Asha crossed her arms. "Because there's no way you're going to let them hurt her. You're too stupidly decent for that." Despite everything, Jonas laughed. It felt good to have allies, even if they were a conflicted scientist and an engineer with more courage than sense. First thing, Jonas said, we need to make sure she knows she's not alone. That whatever happens, someone's on her side. Vin nodded. I can increase monitoring, make sure any test is documented. Can't stop it, but I can ensure there's evidence if we need it later. I can handle logistics, Asha added. Access codes, protocol overrides, emergency shutdowns, just in case. Jonas was about to respond when his pad chimed. A message from Vishara, simple, hesitant. Would you like to have dinner in the restricted zone? I want to try making Earth food. His concern transformed into something softer. Gentleman and lady, I have a date with a cooking experiment. We'll continue this tomorrow. The restricted zone at night looked different, less threatening, more lonely. Vishara had set up a small cooking station, and the spread of ingredients looked like they'd been researched with terrifying precision. I watched 37 hours of human cooking programs, she admitted, nervously arranging utensils. I think I understand the concept of pasta. Jonas tried very hard not to laugh. That's ambitious. I wanted to make something you'd like. Her hands twisted together. No one's ever visited my quarters before. I wanted it to be special. The cooking was a disaster in the best possible way. The pasta somehow achieved the consistency of rubber and glue simultaneously. The sauce defied physics by being both watery and chunky, and when Vishara got nervous trying to strain the noodles, the gravitational fluctuation sent the entire pot floating for 3 terrifying seconds before Jonas caught it. They both froze. Then Jonas started laughing, and after a moment, Vishara joined him. Real laughter, bright and startled, like she'd forgotten the sound of her own joy. They ended up eating ration bars and talking for hours instead. Jonas told her about mining colonies and jury-rigged engines. She told him about dreams she had of places she'd never seen, worlds where gravity felt gentle instead of weaponized. I watched recordings of you, she admitted suddenly, then went crimson. Not in a strange way, You talked to me like I was normal, and I didn't know how to respond. So I watched old security footage and practiced conversations. Jonas felt something in his chest constrict painfully. You practiced talking to me? I didn't want to say the wrong thing. Make you leave. She met his eyes, vulnerable in a way that made him understand how much courage this took. Everyone leaves eventually. Everyone should, but I didn't want you to. He reached out slowly and took her hand. Her skin was warm, slightly textured, and her fingers trembled in his grip. I'm not going anywhere, he said quietly. The gravitational sensors around them dropped to whisper quiet. The ambient pressure in the room shifted, became something comfortable, like the universe itself was relaxing. She stared at their joined hands like she'd never seen anything more miraculous. I liked having you here, she whispered. I've never felt this. Safe. Is that the word? Yeah. Jonas squeezed gently. That's the word. A small creature, something like a luminescent jellyfish made of folded gravity, drifted out from behind a console. It pulsed with soft light and immediately attached itself to Jonas's shoulder. That's Pip, Vishara said, almost apologetically. He's a gravitational microorganism. He likes you. Pip made a sound like wind chimes, laughing. I like him too. Jonas watched the creature pulse happily. Does this mean I'm part of your ecosystem now? Maybe. She was smiling, really smiling. Is that okay? Oh, more than okay. They sat in comfortable silence, hands still linked, while Pip sang his strange gravity songs and the dock hummed around them. For a few hours, Vishara wasn't a weapon or a hazard or a subject. She was just someone sharing terrible pasta with someone who cared. And 3 observation rooms away, Dr. Vin saved every second of footage, knowing they'd need proof that monsters could learn to be human again if someone was brave enough to teach them. Dr. Vin's proposal was simple and terrifying in equal measure. She needs to be seen as more than a containment problem, he explained to Jonas over breakfast. If people see her using her abilities to help rather than harm, it changes the narrative. makes Rivox's test harder to justify. You want to use her as a PR stunt? Jonas's voice went cold. I want to give her a chance to be heroic instead of horrific. Vin met his glare steadily. There's a difference. And if we're lucky, it might buy us enough time to find a way out of this. Jonas hated that it made sense. The opportunity came 2 days later, sudden and unplanned in the way disasters always are. Cargo Platform 9 was undergoing routine maintenance when someone, somewhere, made a mistake. A critical support beam failed. The platform tilted. 20 tons of stabilization equipment began sliding toward the edge, and beneath it, 6 workers scrambled to escape the collapse zone. Alarms shrieked. Emergency protocols activated, and every safety system on Dock 77 started screaming that they had 40 seconds before catastrophic failure killed everyone in the impact radius. Jonas didn't think. He ran toward the restricted zone, toward where Vishara sat reading a manual on engine maintenance. Vishara, Platform 9. People are trapped. She looked up, confused. Then her eyes widened as she accessed the alert feeds. I can't. If I go out there, if people see me, they'll see you save lives. Jonas grabbed her hand, pulled her to her feet. I'll be right beside you. You won't be alone. Dr. Vin's voice crackled over comms, official and commanding. Subject 1. You are cleared for emergency intervention. Authorization Vin 7 Alpha. Go. They ran together, Jonas's hand tight in hers, through corridors that emptied as workers fled the danger. Pip clung to Jonas's shoulder, chiming anxiously. Platform 9 loomed ahead, twisted metal screaming under impossible stress. Workers clung to failing handholds. Equipment avalanched toward the edge. 30 seconds. Vishara stopped at the platform's edge, and Jonas felt her hand trembling in his. I don't know if I can control it, she whispered. You don't have to control it. Jonas squeezed her hand. You just have to care, and I know you do. She closed her eyes, drew a breath, and reached out with senses Jonas couldn't begin to understand. The platform stopped falling. Not slowly, instantly. Every piece of equipment, every failing support, every terrified worker froze mid-motion as Vishara's gravitational field expanded, caught everything, held it suspended. Then, with a precision that made Dr. Vin weep with scientific joy, she began sorting. Equipment floated gently back to safe zones. Workers were lifted and deposited on stable ground. The platform itself rotated, rebalanced, settled into a configuration that emergency crews could secure. 40 tons of metal and lives moved like puzzle pieces by someone who'd been told for years she was too dangerous to trust. When the last worker touched down safely, applause erupted. Actual applause, echoing through the dock's corridors, as workers who'd feared her for years watched her save their colleagues without harming anyone. Vishara opened her eyes, looked at Jonas, and her expression was pure wonder. I did it. I didn't hurt anyone. You never wanted to hurt anyone, Jonas grinned. You just needed a reason to try. The celebration lasted through the shift change. Workers who'd maintained 10-meter distances approached cautiously to thank her. Someone brought her food without being asked. Engineer Asha started a collection for a commendation medal, and even Supervisor Kelm managed a stilted but genuine expression of gratitude. For exactly 4 hours, Vishara Lincor was a hero. Then Director Rivox watched the footage in his office and made a call that would haunt him. Acceleration on the evaluation, he told his oversight committee. If she can control her abilities this precisely, she's not dangerous enough to justify our current budget allocations. We need to demonstrate actual risk, or we lose funding. Committee members murmured agreement. Someone mentioned insurance premiums. Someone else brought up military applications. No one mentioned that they were discussing breaking a person to preserve a budget. In Tool Bay 6, Engineer Hask watched the celebration with mounting jealousy. The human had made him look like a fool, had proven that intuition and compassion could achieve what Hask's decade of expertise couldn't. He'd planned something small, a minor sabotage to Jonas's equipment, Nothing life-threatening, just enough to embarrass him, make him look incompetent. But when he activated the device, when he tried to overload Jonas's diagnostic tools during a calibration, Pip detected the interference pattern. The little gravitational creature chimed frantically, and Vishara felt the disturbance from 3 corridors away. She reached out, located the source, and with surgical precision, crushed the sabotage device into a marble-sized sphere of compressed metal. Hask stared at the ruined equipment in his hands. Then, at the Corinth. Standing across the bay with Jonas beside her, violet eyes locked on him with an expression that promised she'd be watching very carefully from now on. He dropped the device, fled, and spent the rest of the shift wondering if being crushed into a marble was worse than the humiliation. That night, Jonas found Vishara on her usual bench, but this time she wasn't alone. Asha sat with her, talking about engine modifications. Dr. Vince stood nearby, discussing research possibilities that treated her as a colleague, not a subject. She looked up when Jonas approached, and her smile could have powered the station. "They want to write an article about me," she said, breathless with disbelief, for the doc newsletter about the rescue. "You earned it." Jonas sat beside her, their familiar position. "Hero of Doc 77. Only because you were there." Her hand found his automatically now, comfortable with the contact. "I couldn't have done it alone." "You didn't have to," he said simply. Across the facility in a secured meeting room, Director Ryvox finalized the evaluation protocols. The test would trigger tomorrow morning. They'd threaten the human, force a violent response, and prove that Subject 1 was still too unstable for anything except containment, and absolutely no one would be able to stop it once it started. Dr. Vin saw the authorization come through and sent Jonas a 2-word message: "Tomorrow, run." But Jonas looked at Vishara, laughing with Asha about something ridiculous, finally surrounded by people instead of empty space, and knew that running wasn't an option. Some fights you couldn't walk away from, even if walking away would keep you safe. Jonas didn't sleep that night. Instead, he did what he did best when problems had too many moving parts. He researched. Dr. Vin had left him access codes, probably intentionally. The Project Graviton files opened like a wound, bleeding classified information across his screen in the quiet of his quarters. Subject 1. That's what they called her in the early reports. Not Vishara. Not even Corinth Child 14. Just Subject 1. He read about the war, about the Corinth civilization, once peaceful, caught between 2 expanding empires who saw their gravitational abilities as weapons worth harvesting. About the raids that took children from homes and delivered them to laboratories. About the conditioning. They'd put her in rooms where gravity could crush or lift her at random. Taught her that controlling her emotions controlled her survival. Punished displays of fear, joy, sadness with physical pain until she learned to suppress everything. Then they'd sent her to planets in rebellion, made her collapse buildings, shatter infrastructure, break cities, all while telling her it was necessary, that this was what she was for, that feeling guilty made her weak. She'd been 7 years old. The reports detailed her deployments with clinical precision. 17 worlds reduced to compliance, estimated casualties in the millions, though the numbers blurred after a while into pure abstraction. And then the war ended. The empires collapsed. The laboratories were disbanded, and dozens of weaponized Corinth children were scattered across the galaxy, too dangerous to rehabilitate, too expensive to dispose of ethically. Vishara had been classified unstable because she'd started crying during her final deployment, had refused to collapse a civilian hospital, had turned her powers on her handlers instead, killing 3 of them before she could be contained. She'd been 13. They'd labeled her damaged goods, assigned her to Doc 77, where her powers could be useful but contained, where she could work until some bureaucrat decided she'd outlived her budget allocation. Jonas closed the files with shaking hands. The room spun. He wanted to vomit, scream, break something. Instead, He got up and walked to the restricted zone. It was 3 in the morning. Vishara would be asleep, but he needed to see her, needed to confirm she was real and not just a collection of trauma masquerading as a person. She wasn't asleep. She was sitting on her bench, staring at a holographic display showing Corinth music notation, trying to remember what her people's song sounded like. "Jonas?" She looked up, surprised. "It's late. Are you okay?" "No." He sat beside her, closer than usual, like proximity could somehow protect her from what he'd learned. "I read your files, the real ones, all of them." Her expression shuddered. "Oh? You were a child. They took you and made you into a weapon, and then blamed you for what they created. I still killed people." Her voice went flat, empty. "Millions of people. Children like I was. Families. I remember their faces sometimes, the ones I could see before the buildings fell. You were following orders. You were conditioned. I was old enough to know it was wrong." She turned to face him, and the pain in her eyes was ancient. "I knew, Jonas. Every deployment I knew. And I did it anyway because I was too afraid to stop. Too weak to refuse." "You weren't weak. You were 13 and terrified and—" "I'm a monster." The words came out quiet, final. "You should hate me. Everyone should. I hate myself." The gravitational field around them rippled, unstable. Warning lights flickered. Jonas took her hand despite the danger, despite the power that could crush him without effort. "Listen to me." His voice was steady, certain. "What they did to you was evil. What they made you do was evil. But you aren't evil. You're someone who survived something no one should have to survive, and then they punished you for surviving it. They're going to test me tomorrow." She said it without emotion, like she'd already accepted it. "Dr. Vin told me. They're going to try to make me lose control, prove I'm still dangerous. And they're going to use you to do it. I know. You should leave. Request transfer. Get as far from me as possible." She pulled her hand free. "Because when they threaten you, I won't be able to control myself. I'll destroy everything trying to protect you, and then they'll be right about me. Or," Jonas said carefully, "you'll prove them wrong. Show them that you can control your abilities even when you're terrified. That you're not the weapon they made you." "I can't." Her voice broke. "Jonas, I can't. Not if they hurt you. I'll lose control. People will get hurt, and I'll deserve whatever they do to me after." "You don't deserve any of this." Jonas stood, pulled her to her feet, and did something incredibly stupid. He hugged her, properly, completely, like she was someone worth protecting instead of someone to be protected from. She froze. Then, slowly, her arms came up and wrapped around him. Her face pressed against his shoulder, and he felt dampness seep through his shirt. "I destroyed worlds," she whispered into his chest. "How can you stand to touch me? Because you're not those worlds. You're not your worst day or your worst order or your worst fear." He pulled back enough to look at her face. "You're the person who practiced conversations so you wouldn't say the wrong thing, who tried to make terrible pasta because you wanted to make me happy, who saved 6 people without hurting anyone because you finally had a reason to try. That's not enough to balance the scales." "Maybe not, but it's enough to start." He wiped tears from her face with his thumb. "And if they're going to test us tomorrow, I need you to know something. I'm not afraid of you. I'm afraid for you. There's a difference." She stared at him like he'd spoken a language she'd forgotten existed. "Why are you like this? Why do you keep choosing me?" "Us, because someone should have chosen you a long time ago." Jonas smiled sadly. "And because I'm too stubborn to start making smart decisions now. They'll hurt you to break me. Then I'll have to be tougher than I look." He squeezed her shoulders. "We'll face it together, you and me. And whatever happens, you're not alone. Never again." She kissed him, brief, desperate, tasting of salt and terror and hope that didn't know if it was allowed to exist. "I'm going to ruin your life," she said when they broke apart. Too late. Jonas grinned, despite everything. You already did the moment you blushed when I sat down. Despite the tears, despite the dread, despite everything, she laughed. Small and broken and absolutely genuine. In the observation room, Dr. Vin watched the readings with a sinking heart. Tomorrow's test would break them both. He could see it coming like an avalanche, unstoppable and devastating. But for tonight, in the quiet dark of Dock 77, a weapon learned what it felt like to be chosen instead of deployed. And a mechanic learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stay. The test began at 0900 hours, and Jonas knew it was starting because every alarm in Dock 77 activated at once. Not maintenance alarms, not safety protocols, emergency containment sirens, the kind reserved for catastrophic gravitational breaches that could collapse the entire station. Vishara looked up from her work, confusion morphing into fear. That's not a drill, that's... The lights cut out. Emergency red illumination kicked in, bathing everything in blood-colored shadows. Blast doors slammed shut around the restricted zone, sealing her in. Sealing Jonas in with her. Director Ryvox's voice echoed over the station intercom, artificially calm. Attention all personnel. Subject 1 evaluation is in progress. Maintain minimum safe distance. Security teams initiate protocol collapse. Veshara grabbed Jonas's arm. You need to leave. Now. They're going to... Armed security units materialized from the shadows. 10 of them, in full combat gear, weapons trained not on Veshara, but on Jonas. Subject 1. The lead guard barked. Remain still. This is a mandatory evaluation of your threat level and stability. Any movement will be interpreted as hostile action. I'm not moving. Veshara's voice shook. Please, just let him go. He's not part of this. The human is now considered a potential casualty risk. His presence will help us measure your ability to maintain emotional control under stress. Jonas understood then, with perfect terrible clarity. They weren't testing her powers. They were testing whether her attachment to him would make her dangerous. This is messed up, he said flatly. Even for bureaucratic theater, this is impressively messed up. The guard closest to him drove a rifle butt into his stomach. Jonas folded, gasping, pain exploding across his ribs. Jonas! Vishara lunged forward. The guard's weapons immediately targeted her. Gravitational sensors screamed as her field destabilized, pressure waves rippling outward. Remain still, Subject 1. He's hurt. You hurt him. Her voice was rising, power building. Let me help him. Negative. The human is now under containment evaluation protocol. Any attempt to assist him will result in immediate suppression measures. Another guard kicked Jonas's leg. He bit back a scream, tasted copper. The metal walls groaned, began to bend inward. Temperature dropped as gravity itself began behaving strangely, hot and cold in pockets, pressure fluctuating. Please, stop. Vishara was crying now, power leaking out in uncontrolled waves. Please, I'll do anything, just don't hurt him. Your compliance is noted. However, evaluation parameters require continued stress application. A guard raised his weapon, pointed it at Jonas's head. The barrel glow indicated it was charged to fire. Something in Veshara broke. The restricted zone exploded. Not literally, but gravitationally, the effect was the same. Pressure waves strong enough to dent reinforced steel radiated outward. The ceiling cracked, floor plates buckled. Guards were thrown backward, crashing into walls that bent around them like soft metal. Veshara screamed, and it wasn't words. It was pure anguish given physical form, gravity weaponized by terror. Jonas should have run. Every instinct said run. The pressure around him was crushing, his bones creaking under impossible weight. The air itself seemed to be folding inward. Instead, he stood up. It took everything, every ounce of stubbornness, every scrap of determination. His legs shook, his vision blurred. Blood ran from his nose as pressure differentials did things human bodies weren't designed to handle. But he walked toward her, Step. Gravity tried to flatten him. Step. His knees nearly buckled. Step. The guards were shouting warnings. Alarms were screaming. Dr. Vin was yelling something over comms about abort protocols. Step. He was 5 meters away. The pressure was enough to crush bones. Step. 4 meters. He couldn't feel his legs anymore. Step. 3 meters. Everything hurt. Step. 2 meters. Bashara saw him, her eyes wide with horror. "Don't." She sobbed the word. "Jonas, don't. I'll kill you. Please don't." Step. 1 meter. He could barely see through the tears and blood and pain. He reached out, his hand trembling, shaking, barely able to move through the gravity well she'd created. And he touched her face. The gravity vanished. Not gradually. Instantly. Everything snapped back to normal, as if reality itself had taken a breath and decided to behave again. Bashara stared at him, power still crackling around her, ready to defend or destroy. Then she saw the blood, the bruises, the way he could barely stand. "Oh, God." "Oh, no. I hurt you. I hurt you." "You didn't." Jonas's voice was raw. "They hurt me. You were trying to save me. I lost control. I almost crushed you. I told you I'd destroy everything. You stopped." He swayed, caught himself. "They pushed you as hard as they could, and you still stopped. Because you chose to. You're bleeding. I've bled before." He tried to smile. Failed. "You should see the other guy." Bashara's legs gave out. She collapsed, not from weakness, but from the absolute terror of what she'd almost done. Jonas followed her down, unable to stand anymore, and they ended up on the floor together, him bleeding, her shaking, both broken in different ways. "I'm sorry." She whispered it over and over. "I'm so sorry." "Not your fault." Jonas managed to get an arm around her. "Never your fault." The security teams were retreating, called off by someone. Dr. Vin's voice crackled over comms, furious in a way Jonas had never heard from him. "That's enough. Test concluded. Subject 1 showed remarkable restraint given the stimulus. I'm filing a formal complaint about this entire procedure." Director Ryvox's response was cold. "Restraint?" She nearly collapsed the entire dock. "The human is lucky to be alive. The human is alive because she chose to save him instead of destroying everything." Vin's voice shook with rage. "She demonstrated more control under duress than most trained soldiers. This test proved nothing except your willingness to torture someone who's already suffered enough. That's not your call to make, Doctor." "Then I'm making it anyway. I'm done being complicit in this." The comms cut off. Medics rushed in, tried to separate Jonas from Bashara. She clung to him with desperate strength, terrified that letting go meant losing him. "I'm not leaving." Jonas told the medics, told her, told anyone listening. "Treat me here or don't treat me at all." They treated him there. Bashara held his hand through every application of medical foam, every injection, every scan. Her tears fell on his arm, and she apologized for even that. "You should hate me," she whispered. "I don't." Jonas squeezed her hand as hard as his battered body allowed. "I'm not going anywhere, you understand me? They can run 1,000 tests, and I'm still not going anywhere." "Why?" It came out broken, confused. "Why do you keep staying?" Jonas looked at her, at this woman who'd been weaponized as a child, traumatized into suppressing every emotion, used and contained and blamed for what they'd made her. This woman who'd just shown more strength in stopping herself than most people showed in a lifetime of trying. "Because you're worth staying for," he said simply. "And I'm too stubborn to let anyone convince me otherwise." She kissed his forehead, gentle, terrified of hurting him more. And in that kiss was everything she couldn't say, all the fear and hope and desperate wish that maybe, just maybe, someone could still choose her after seeing what she was capable of. Above them, in the observation room, Dr. Vin deleted nothing. Every second of footage remained, backed up to 17 different locations, because sometimes the only way to fight monsters is to prove they're human beings who've been tortured into hiding it. And sometimes that proof requires showing the world exactly how far some people will go to keep others afraid. Jonas spent 2 days in medical, and Vaishara didn't leave his side. Not to eat, not to sleep. She sat beside his bed like a sentinel, terrified that if she looked away, someone would hurt him again. Dr. Vin visited on the 2nd day, his expression grim and determined. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got run over by a freight hauler that felt bad about it and backed up to check." Jonas tried to sit up, winced. "But I'll live. What's the damage?" Rivox is claiming the test was a success. Proof that Subject 1 is too unstable for anything except maximum containment. He's recommending transfer to a military research facility. Vaishara made a sound like something dying. "Where they can study me properly. I know what that means. Not if I have anything to say about it." Vin pulled out a data chip. "I have every second of that test. Unedited, from 17 angles, including audio of their protocols and your restraint. It's damning, but I need your permission to use it." "Use it." Jonas said it before Vaishara could respond. "Show everyone what they did. If I release this, it'll cause chaos, investigations, political fallout, possibly criminal charges, and you'll both be at the center of it." "Good." Jonas's voice went hard. "Let there be chaos. Let them answer for what they did. Not just to her, to all the others like her." Vaishara stared at him. "You want to fight this? Publicly?" "I want to make sure they can never do this to anyone else." He took her hand. "But it's your choice. Your life they're trying to control. I'll support whatever you decide." She was quiet for a long time. Then, so softly it was almost inaudible. "I want to testify. If they'll let me, I want to tell them what happened, what they made me into, and what I'm trying to become." Vin smiled like she'd given him a gift. "Then let's give them a reason to listen." The footage hit Doc 77's internal network at 1400 hours. By 1430, it had spread to 6 other facilities. By 1500, news networks were picking it up. The response was immediate and explosive. Workers who'd been content to fear Vaishara from a distance watched armed guards beat an unarmed human while she begged them to stop. Watched her lose control not from malice, but from desperation. Watched her stop herself at great cost to protect him. And they got angry. By dinner, there were protests outside the administrative building. Safety committees filed complaints. Union representatives demanded explanations. Someone started a petition calling for Rivox's removal that gathered 3,000 signatures in 2 hours. Asha found Jonas in medical, grinning fiercely. "The doc's losing its mind, in a good way. Half the facility is ready to march on Rivox's office, the other half already did. What about command? They going to suppress this?" "They're trying, but Vin sent copies to oversight committees, safety boards, and about 40 journalists." Asha's grin widened. "Rivox is scrambling to contain it, but you can't contain something this viral. This is everywhere." A knock on the door. Jonas expected Vin or maybe Kelm. What he got was Engineer Hask, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "I owe you an apology." Hask didn't meet his eyes. "Multiple apologies. I sabotaged your equipment. I made bets on when you'd fail. I've been an ass." "Yeah, you have." Jonas waited. "I was jealous. You made everything I'd studied for years look irrelevant. You treated her like a person when I'd spent a decade treating her like a hazard to be managed." Hask finally looked up. "I was wrong, about a lot of things, and I want to help if you'll let me." Vaishara spoke up, voice quiet. "You tried to hurt him." "I did, and I'm asking you both to let me try to make that right." Hask pulled out a data tablet. "I have access codes to Rivox's personal files. Things even Vin can't get to. Proof that he's been inflating threat assessments to maintain funding. Proof that he knew this test would hurt you both and ordered it anyway." Jonas looked at Vaishara. She looked at the engineer who'd bet against her humanity, who'd tried to sabotage the first person to show her kindness. Then she nodded, once. "Help us," she said. "Please." Hask's shoulders sagged with relief. "Thank you. I'll get you everything I can." Over the next 6 hours they built a case, not just against Rivox, but against the entire system that had created him, the military contractors who profited from fear, the oversight committees that had turned blind eyes, the protocols that treated sentient beings as equipment to be maintained. Dr. Vin coordinated with contacts in the Galactic Council, secured an emergency hearing. Asha handled security protocols, making sure no one could bury the evidence. Hask provided documentation that proved this wasn't negligence, but deliberate cruelty masked as procedure. And Jonas sat with Vishara, helping her prepare testimony that would be the hardest thing she'd ever done. "I don't know if I can do this," she admitted as night fell. "Stand in front of a council and tell them everything. Let them see what I am." "They already know what you are." Jonas squeezed her hand. "Now you get to show them who you want to become. What if they don't care? What if they decide I'm too dangerous anyway?" "Then we fight that too." He smiled tiredly. "Together. Like we've been doing." Pip floated between them, chiming softly. The little gravitational creature had grown attached to them both, and its presence had become a comfort. "If I testify," Bashara said slowly, "if I tell them everything, there's no going back. Everyone will know. The worlds I destroyed. The people I killed. The weapon I was. They'll also know about the people you saved, the control you showed, the person you're choosing to be now." Jonas touched her face gently. "You're not just your worst moments. You're also every moment you chose to be better." She leaned into his touch, drew strength from it. "If you believe I can do this, I believe you can do anything, you just need to believe it too." She closed her eyes, made a decision that terrified her. "Okay, I'll testify. I'll tell them everything, and maybe if I'm lucky they'll see past the weapon to the person underneath." "They will." Jonas said it with absolute certainty. "Because I did. And if a stubborn mechanic with no credentials can see it, a whole council can too." Dr. Vin entered with news. "The hearing is set. 3 days from now. Full council attendance, public record. Rivox is being called to testify first, then you, Vishara. It's the best chance we're going to get. Then we'd better make it count." Jonas tried to stand, managed it with help. 3 days to prepare the most important testimony of her life. No pressure on Jonas. Bashara caught his arm. "What if I fail? What if I lose control during the testimony?" He turned, looked at her with eyes that had seen her at her worst, and chosen to stay anyway. "Then I'll walk through whatever gravity you throw at me again, as many times as it takes." "That could kill you." "Maybe." He smiled. "But I'm too stubborn to let that stop me." She kissed him then, properly, desperately, like he was the only solid thing in a universe that kept trying to tear her apart. And he kissed her back, battered and bruised and absolutely certain that this was exactly where he needed to be. In the observation room, Dr. Vin watched the gravitational reading stabilize, watched two people who should have destroyed each other become each other's anchors instead, and he allowed himself a small moment of hope that maybe, just maybe, they could change a system that had forgotten how to see people as anything other than problems to be managed or resources to be exploited. But first, they had to survive the next 3 days and convince a council that weapons could learn to be human again. The Galactic Council chamber was designed to intimidate. Crystalline walls amplified every sound. Seats arranged in ascending circles made speakers feel small, and the council representatives themselves sat elevated, looking down on those who came before them like gods judging mortals. Vishara stood in the center circle, and she'd never looked more terrified. Jonas sat in the witness section, close enough to be seen but not close enough to help. Doctor. Vin and Asha flanked him, silent support. Even Hask had come sitting stiffly, ready to provide testimony if needed. Director Rivox testified first, confident and articulate. He presented Vishara as a managed threat, The test as a necessary safety protocol, the results as proof that continued containment was essential. Subject 1 demonstrated catastrophic destabilization under mild stress conditions, he explained smoothly. The human maintenance worker was injured despite our careful protocols. Imagine the damage if she were in a civilian population center during an emotional episode. He showed graphs, data, carefully edited footage that made Vishara look unstable and Jonas look foolish for getting close to her. The cost of maintaining Subject 1 is high, Rivox continued, but the cost of not maintaining her would be incalculable. She requires specialized containment, constant monitoring, and complete isolation from emotional stimulus. Anything less risks catastrophic casualties, the council murmured. Several representatives nodded. Jonas felt sick watching them buy into the narrative. Then Dr. Vin was called. He submitted his unedited footage, complete audio logs, physiological data, showed them not a test, but torture designed to break someone who was already broken. Subject 1, Vishara Lin Kaur, showed remarkable restraint. Vin stated flatly. She was systematically provoked. The human worker was beaten in front of her. She begged for it to stop. And when she did lose control, she stopped herself before causing fatalities. That's not instability. That's someone fighting conditioning that was designed to make her into a weapon. He presented the Project Graviton files, showed them what had been done to Corinth children, made them see the training, the torture, the years of abuse masked as military necessity. You're looking at the result of our cruelty, Vin told them, and calling it proof that she's dangerous. But the real danger is a system that creates weapons from children and then punishes them for being what we made them. The council's mood shifted. Questions emerged. Rivox's answers became defensive. Then Asha testified, providing evidence of sabotage attempts, budget inflation, falsified reports. Hask followed, confirming that Rivox had knowingly ordered dangerous protocols for political rather than safety reasons. The case against Rivox built like a structure, each testimony another support beam. Then it was Vishara's turn. She walked to the center circle on shaking legs. Jonas wanted to go to her, but he could only watch as she stood alone in front of representatives from 100 worlds. "My name is Vishara Lin Kaur," she began, voice barely above a whisper. "I was taken when I was 7 years old. They taught me to use gravity as a weapon. They taught me that feeling anything made me weak, and they sent me to 17 worlds where I killed millions of people who never did anything to hurt me." The chamber was silent. I remember their faces, some of them, the ones who were close enough to see before the buildings fell. I remember a child holding a toy. I remember an old man trying to protect his family. I remember all of them, and I'll remember them forever. Her voice cracked. The gravitational sensors around the chamber flickered but held steady. For years I believed I was a monster. Everyone treated me like one, so it must be true. I isolated myself because I was afraid of what I might do. Afraid that caring about anything would make me lose control. She looked at Jonas, drew strength from his steady gaze. Then someone sat beside me. He didn't know he wasn't supposed to, didn't know I was dangerous. He just saw someone sitting alone and decided that was wrong. And for the first time in years, I felt safe enough to feel something other than fear. The sensors stabilized. The pressure in the room normalized. I'm not asking you to forgive what I did. I can't forgive myself for it. But I'm asking you to understand that I'm trying to be more than what they made me. That given a choice, I choose not to be a weapon. I choose to save people instead of destroying them. I choose to feel even though it terrifies me. And if you can't see that, her voice strengthened, if all you can see is a threat to be contained, then you're no better than the people who created me. The council erupted in discussion. Representatives argued, debated, gestured. Rivox's expression darkened dangerously. Then he made his final play. Counselors with respect were hearing testimony about intentions. But intentions don't matter when gravity can crush a city. I propose a demonstration. Let Subject 1 show us her control under neutral conditions. No provocation, no stress, just basic field manipulation. Dr. Vin shot to his feet. Absolutely not. After what she's been through. If she's stable, she should be able to perform basic tasks. Ryvox's smile was cold. Unless you're admitting she's too unstable even for simple demonstrations? The council debated, voted, approved the demonstration despite Vin's protests. A testing device was brought in. Simple gravitational field, nothing dangerous. Vishara just needed to manipulate it, show fine control. She approached it, reached out with her power. Everything seemed fine. Then Ryvox activated something in his coat. The testing device overloaded. Gravitational feedback screamed through the chamber. The illegal amplifier he'd hidden turned a simple test into a catastrophic cascade that would crush everyone in the room if Vishara couldn't contain it. She tried. Her power reached out, grabbed the cascade, but it was too much. The feedback was tearing through her, amplifying every emotion, every fear, turning her into exactly the weapon Ryvox claimed she was. The chamber began to collapse, walls cracking, floor buckling, representatives screaming. Jonas didn't think. He ran. Security tried to stop him. He dodged. The gravitational field was crushing, pressure building like standing at the bottom of an ocean. His injuries screamed. His body protested every step. But he reached the center circle, reached Vishara, who was drowning in power she couldn't control. "I can't stop it," she sobbed. "It's too much. I'm going to kill everyone." "No." Jonas grabbed her hands. "You're not. We're going to stop it together." "You can't. You're human. You don't have... I have you." He pulled her close, felt the gravity trying to tear them apart. "And you have me. So let's do something impossible." He didn't know if it would work. Didn't know if human neural patterns could interface with Carinth gravitational fields. Didn't know if trust and desperation were enough to bridge the gap between their biologies. But he opened himself to her anyway, stopped resisting the power and let it flow through him. It hurt. God, it hurt. Like every cell was being pulled apart and put back together wrong. But in that pain, something miraculous happened. He became a ground, a filter. His human limitations forced the chaotic energy into patterns it could follow, not controlling it, just giving it a path that didn't end in destruction. Together they channeled the cascade. Vishara's power through Jonas's limitations through Vishara's precision. Human and Carinth, weapon and mechanic, working as something neither could be alone. The illegal device shattered. The cascade dissipated. The chamber stabilized. And Jonas collapsed in Vishara's arms, unconscious but alive. Security grabbed Ryvox, found the activation device in his coat. Dr. Vin was already calling for medical teams, for investigators, for anyone who could help. But Vishara just held Jonas, cradling him like he was made of glass and hope. "Please, wake up," she whispered. "Please, I can't do this without you." His eyes fluttered open, focused on her. And he smiled. "Did we win?" "You saved everyone. Again." She was crying and laughing simultaneously. "You channeled gravitational energy. Humans can't do that. It should have killed you." "Told you I was stubborn." He coughed, winced. "What about Ryvox?" "Under arrest. Council saw everything. They know he tried to murder them to prove his point." Around them, representatives were regaining their composure. Looking at Vishara not with fear but with awe, watching her hold a human who'd done the impossible just to help her. The head counselor spoke, voice shaking. "Vishara Lin Kaur, in light of recent events and your demonstrated control and character, this council grants you full civic status. You are no longer classified as a containment subject. You are free." Vishara stared. "Free?" "Free. With our apologies for what was done to you, and our hope that you'll use your abilities to help others, as you clearly wish to do." She couldn't speak, could only hold Jonas tighter and let tears fall on his battered face. "You're free," he whispered. "We did it. We did it. she echoed, together. And in a chamber designed to make people feel small, two people who'd been broken by systems that saw them as tools held each other and proved that humanity wasn't about species or power. It was about choosing to stay when leaving would be easier, about seeing weapons as people and people as worth saving, about sitting beside someone everyone else feared and asking if the seat was taken. Jonas woke up 3 days later in a medical bay that wasn't on Dock 77. The ceiling was wrong. The ambient hum was different. And Vishara was asleep in a chair beside his bed, her hand wrapped around his like she'd been holding on for days. She looked peaceful, more peaceful than he'd ever seen her, like something that had been wound too tight for years had finally been allowed to relax. He squeezed her hand gently. Her eyes opened immediately, violet and alert and flooding with relief. "You're awake." She touched his face like confirming he was real. "You've been unconscious for 3 days. They said the neural stress from channeling gravitational energy should have killed you. But it didn't." Jonas smiled. "Guess I'm more stubborn than physics." "You're ridiculous." But she was smiling too, bright and unguarded. "The doctors say you'll need rest. No strenuous activity for at least a month. Dr. Vin has been checking on you every 6 hours. Asha brought flowers. Even Hask visited, though he was too awkward to stay long." "What about Rivox?" "Arrested. Charged with attempted murder, falsifying safety records, abuse of authority. He's facing life imprisonment. The Council is investigating everyone connected to Project Graviton. There are already reforms being discussed for how they handle individuals with dangerous abilities." "Good." Jonas tried to sit up, managed it with her help. "And you? What happens now?" Vishara was quiet for a moment. "They offered me a position, leading research into gravitational medicine. Apparently, what you and I did, the way we channeled energy together, it could revolutionize how they treat gravitational disorders, save thousands of lives." "That's amazing." "It is, and terrifying. And I don't know if I can do it alone." She met his eyes. "They said I could choose my team, assistants, researchers, consultants, anyone I wanted." "Sounds like a good opportunity to pick smart people who won't treat you like a weapon." "I picked you," she said it simply, "as my primary consultant. They're calling it emotional stability specialist, but really, it's just be there and make sure I don't forget I'm a person." Jonas laughed, then winced as his ribs protested. "That might be the best job description I've ever heard. Do I get business cards? If you want them?" She was nervous now, vulnerable. "Jonas, you don't have to say yes. You've already done more for me than anyone ever has. I won't be upset if you want to go back to your shop, to your life before all this." "My shop's been foreclosed." Jonas took her hand in both of his. "And my life before this was just surviving. You're offering me a chance to actually live, to do something that matters with someone who matters. Why would I say no to that? Because I'm still dangerous, still broken in ways that might never fully heal, still have nightmares about what I did." Her voice dropped. "Still might lose control and hurt you. Then we'll deal with it, together, like we've been doing." He pulled her closer. "Vishara, you're not broken. You're healing. There's a difference, and I want to be there while you do it. If you'll let me." She kissed him, soft, careful, full of promise and terror and hope that was starting to believe it might last. "I'll let you," she whispered. "Always." The next 6 months transformed everything. The research facility on Sanctuary Station became their new home. It was bright, open, nothing like the oppressive darkness of Dock 77. Vishara's lab overlooked a nebula that painted the walls in shifting colors. She worked with patients who'd been hurt by gravitational accidents, learned to use her abilities to heal instead of harm. Each successful treatment was a small redemption, a life saved to balance against the lives lost. Jonas consulted, which mostly meant making sure she ate lunch, talking her through difficult cases, and occasionally sitting beside her during bad days when the memories threatened to drown her. Dr. Vin joined their research team, finally able to do science motivated by curiosity instead of fear. Asha took a position in facility management, claiming someone needed to keep them all organized. Even Hask visited monthly, his expertise in gravitational systems proving invaluable. Pip, the gravitational creature, became something of a mascot, floating through the facility and attaching to anyone who looked sad. The little organism had a talent for emotional support that rivaled any therapy program. But the real transformation wasn't the research or the facility, or even the awards they started receiving for their breakthrough work. It was watching Veshera learn to smile without fear, to laugh without worrying the walls would collapse, to cry during sad moments, and feel joy during good ones, and understand that emotions weren't failures but proof she was alive. It was watching Jonas find purpose beyond survival, building something that mattered with someone who'd taught him that courage wasn't about not being afraid. It was about being terrified and choosing to stay anyway. On a Tuesday that felt like any other Tuesday, Jonas found Veshera in the observation lounge. She was watching the nebula shift colors, lost in thought. He sat beside her, not across from her, not a polite distance away, right beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. She looked at him, and color flooded her cheeks. That same blush from 6 months ago, when a human had been crazy enough to sit next to the most dangerous woman in the facility. The lights flickered slightly. Pressure shifted. The building itself seemed to smile. "You still do that," Jonas said, grinning. "Every single time I sit close to you?" "I can't help it." Veshera tried to look embarrassed but couldn't stop smiling. "You still make me nervous." Good nervous or bad nervous? The best kind of nervous? The kind that reminds me I'm allowed to feel things. She leaned against him. "Jonas, do you ever regret it? Sitting beside me that first day? Everything that happened after?" He thought about it, about the pain and the fear and the moments when death seemed certain, about the system they'd fought, and the prejudices they'd challenged, and the sheer stubborn determination it took to see each other as people instead of problems. "Not even once," he said honestly. "Because that day, I sat next to someone who needed someone to see her, and she saw me back. Everything else was just details. Those were some pretty significant details. Maybe. But they led us here. To this." He gestured at the facility, at the research that was saving lives, at the future they were building together. "I'd walk through crushing gravity 1,000 times if it meant ending up here with you." "Please don't." She kissed his cheek. "Once was terrifying enough." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the nebula paint light across their reflection in the glass. Two people who'd been told they were too broken, too dangerous, too impossible to deserve happiness, who'd decided that was nonsense and built something beautiful anyway. "Hey, Veshera," Jonas said after a while. "Yes?" "You remember what I asked you the first day, when I sat down?" She smiled, knowing where this was going. "You asked if the seat was taken. And you know what? It still isn't." He took her hand, laced their fingers together. "This seat's reserved. Always will be. For someone brave enough to keep choosing to be human, even when everyone told her she was a weapon. For someone who blushes when I sit too close and saves lives with powers that were meant to end them." "Jonas," her voice caught. "That's sappy, ridiculous, embarrassingly sincere. Perfect." She laughed through tears. "It's perfect. You're perfect. This is perfect." "We're not perfect," Jonas corrected gently. "We're just two people who decided that being broken together is better than being whole alone." She rested her head on his shoulder, and they watched the nebula shift through a dozen colors. Around them, the facility hummed with purpose. Research that would change lives. Patients who would heal. A future that neither of them had thought possible 6 months ago. And somewhere in the galaxy, on stations and planets and ships, people who'd been told they were too dangerous to deserve kindness heard about the Corinth who'd learned to be human and the mechanic who'd taught her by refusing to be afraid. They heard about courage that looked like sitting beside someone when everyone else ran. About strength that came from choosing to stay when leaving would be safer. about humanity that wasn't about species, but about seeing people where others saw weapons. Because sometimes the most revolutionary thing you can do is sit beside someone and ask if the seat's taken. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is answer yes when everyone else said no. And sometimes, just sometimes, the most powerful force in the universe isn't gravity or weapons or fear. It's one person choosing to see another person and refusing to look away, even when looking away would be easier, even when staying means risking everything, even when the whole galaxy says you're crazy for trying, especially then. Because humanity isn't about being fearless. It's about being terrified and sitting down anyway. And that, more than any weapon, any power, any force in the cosmos, is what changes worlds, one seat at a time. In the end, their story wasn't about gravity at all. It was about the quiet decision to stay when everything else tells you to run, and how sometimes the smallest seat taken beside a lonely stranger can tilt an entire universe back into balance. So here's the uncomfortable question this story leaves behind. What part of yourself have you been afraid to sit beside? And what would happen if you stopped running from it? Whose life could shift, even slightly, if you dared to choose presence instead of fear? And when was the last time you let someone choose you, without conditions, without armor, without guarantees? If you stayed with us to the end of this emotional chaos disguised as sci-fi, write Encore in the comments, because that's what Jonas became for her, and what we all hope to find at least once in our lives. Tell me which city you're watching from across this strange galaxy of ours. And if this story held you, even for a moment, subscribe, like, hype it in the comments. Share it with someone who might need a reminder that connection is an act of rebellion. And catch the next video waiting for you in the final card on your screen.